Hello, hello. I will let people in as they pop in. Hello, Claire. Nice to see you. I'll say hi to people as they come in, but I really am excited to talk about this topic today. So I'm just going to dive right in and talk about consistency and habits and how to really decide what is best for you. So I was thinking a lot about how I was going to organize this conversation, and I think that it would be best suited if I put it into two buckets. So I want to talk about the emotional piece that goes into the habits. So much of our health and our weight loss specifically has to do with our mood and our emotions. And like those are the things that are kind of keeping us stuck in some of those habit loops, some of those bad habits, those habits that are sabotaging us. And then we have the behavioral piece, which is what we're actually doing and the science behind how to get consistent and the science behind how to even create a behavior. Like there's a formula that's attached to it. And so I think that being able to separate it in these two buckets is going to be most helpful for you to be able to understand. So we're going to start with the emotional piece. And I'm going to give you a quick little introduction. As a cognitive behavioral therapist, something that we use all the time to understand our framework for how humans and all of us operate is we have what's called the CBT triangle. Okay. And so just imagine an equilateral triangle where you have thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. One of those on each point, it doesn't matter where they are. And what that process is saying is that each one of those points affects the other ones equally. So your emotions are going to affect your behaviors and your thoughts. Your thoughts are going to affect your emotions and your behaviors. And your behaviors, you get the gist of it. Okay. So when we're thinking about health, when we're thinking about habits in this emotional bucket, this is where we have a lot of opportunity to make some really amazing changes. So I want to talk about the bad habits that are keeping us stuck. Those are the things like the mindless snacking, the I'm too tired to go to the gym, the not meal planning. And I don't want to say them with like shame in my voice, but I am saying that they are happening usually because there's something underlying emotional going on. Okay. And that doesn't mean like emotional, you have to go to therapy emotional, but there's some sort of unmet need going on. So many times when I talk to clients and I help them work through these stuff, like these steps, I talk to them about my control center philosophy. And so I want you to think of your brain as assistant number one, your body as assistant number two, and then you're up here above in control center. And so you're going to get information from your brain and you're going to get information from your body, but you're still going to be the one making the decisions that you want to make. So when it comes to, oh man, I'm just so hungry and I really want to reach for that craving, my Oreos or my chocolate chips or whatever it is, all of a sudden the thought comes up and it feels like the thought is organic, like, oh, that just sounds really good. And then the behavior is reaching for the food. But there's this emotional piece that's kind of not being addressed. And that's because we spend too much time up here hanging out with assistant number one. So if you're like an overthinker, you get unsure, you're like, I don't know if this is the right decision, or like you're just kind of intense up there sometimes. That means you're spending way too much time with your assistant up top, okay? And so you want to be able to say, like, what is really driving me towards this habit? Like, I like to think about focusing on adding more so than taking away. So I don't like to micromanage. Like, if you recognize that you have a bad habit going on, the way that you're going to resolve that is by inserting in another new habit that's going to help solve that problem, as opposed to trying to get you to stop or eliminate the bad habit that you are doing because that habit is serving something emotionally. And I really go so like I know that that's not a very common way of looking at things, but I think that these emotions are really what's going on inside of us. And that's kind of that nervous system regulation stuff too, where we're just like, there's something in here that's driving me to want this, and I'm not quite sure how. And when I think about those habit loops, our brain and our body is communicating to us all day, every day, whether we're choosing to listen to it. And how we communicate back to our brain and body is through the food that we're eating, the things that we say to ourselves, the experiences that we're putting ourselves in. These are the ways that we're actually forming communication. So if you want, if you're watching this live or if you're coming in at a later time and like you want to drop in the chat, what are some of those things that you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize I was doing this because of an emotional need, whether that's like the snacking or whether that's the I'm opening the door and I'm going in the refrigerator or I'm sitting on the couch because I'm just so exhausted. These are the things that you are doing to tell your body, this is how I want to happen. So let me walk you through a quick example that I actually went through with one of my clients this morning. She is finding herself getting so exhausted after her work days. Like she is just like, I don't know. She's exhausted. I don't have to elaborate on that. And we talked about what are some of the things that are really like she's feeling down on herself about it, but what's underneath that? Like, yes, your exhaustion is happening at a physical level, but what is happening in terms of the mental exhaustion that you're going through? And when we kind of unpacked and were like, what need is this serving? It was that she just craved relaxation. And throughout her day, she didn't have anything to help her relax. Like she was reaching for her phone to scroll. She was taking a lunch break, but she was still on her computer and she was sitting at a desk. Like she wasn't doing anything to actually tell her body it's okay to relax. And so I hear this topic a lot, or this phrase a lot. I actually wrote it down, is that change feels unsafe in the body. And I sat with that and I thought about that. And change doesn't feel unsafe in the body. It's that unexpected change feels unsafe in the body. Just like if you have kids and you are like, okay, we're ready to transition into the next activity, and they freak out. That's because it was so unexpected to them. But when you're like, okay, kiddo, we've got 5 more minutes. Okay, kiddo, we've got 1 more minute. That usually helps kids transition from one activity to the another. And we might not need the minute by minute like type of shift right there for ourselves, but we need to tell our body that like, hey, we're shifting into something different. I actually want to do something different for a change. And you can't just use your words to tell your body, but what you do is it through your actions. And so when I talk about willpower, and I obviously talk a lot of smack about not needing to rely on willpower, but there are some moments of needing to develop a little resiliency up in the front end in the beginning when you're making a change because you really want to start like that's your way of communicating to the body. Hey, I don't want to just sit down and mindlessly scroll on Instagram anymore because every single time you do that, you're telling your body when we feel this way, this is what we do with it. So, on a very simplified level, every single time you're sad, you reach for the cookies. So now your brain and your body are like, oh, cookies, that's how we resolve sadness. So now I'm going to start making you hunger hormones whenever you're starting to feel sad because you said that we're going to have cookies. And so I'm just preparing ourselves for that. And so I think a lot of us don't realize that we have this two-way lane of communication that we're like unintentionally setting up these systems in our life that we genuinely do not want. You don't want to get hungry and want to reach for your comfort food. You don't want to get stressed out and get dysregulated and get decision paralysis and be like, I don't know what I need to eat for dinner. Like, you don't want to have to make emotional decisions because emotional decisions feel really destabilizing and really confusing because then your brain's trying to make sense of them. And then your brain jumps in with like overthinking and either, well, either overthinking or nothing. When you're just like, I'm so confused and I'm so frazzled that nothing comes through your brain. So a lot of the times we're making these emotional decisions without even realizing them, and they are so pre-programmed into our life. Like, I don't know if you grew up in a household that was like this, but some families would say, "What do you want for dinner?" Oh my gosh, I hate that question because it's so vague. It's so like mood determined, and your mood changes every moment of every day. And you can't decide, like, you can't be making strategic decisions with your emotions. And your health has to be a strategic decision. It doesn't have to be so complicated and so difficult and require so much resiliency, but it does have to be strategic. Like, Especially when we're talking about health, because health is such a broad term. Like, even when people use the word healthy, I always say healthy for what? Like, healthy is such a blanket, vague word, just like natural, just like normal. Like, what do those words actually mean? So, we want to be really, really specific about what we're actually trying to communicate to the body and what we actually want out of our plans. And that's where the behavior piece comes in, which I'll get into in a second. But I want you to be aware of the emotional component that's happening and that you don't want to be making decisions emotionally. So I want you to think of your current bad habits as like your commute to work. Okay. And now you're on your commute to work. And then boom, there's a detour. You still get to go to work, but now you got to make a bunch of rights and lefts that you didn't expect. You have to pay attention to the signs, you have to be aware, and you have to pay attention. And so maybe if that detour is going to last for a long time, you drive it 4 or 5 times, it feels a little bit easier. Maybe you have to follow the signs, but not as like stress inducing. And so when you're trying to create a new habit, I want you to think of it of I'm going to work, but I'm taking a detour. And so it's going to feel uncomfortable, right? Like just like I was saying, change feels uncomfortable in the body. Well, unexpected change is really, really uncomfortable. And so being able to have that resiliency when you're trying new habits and you're trying to do new things, while you're also being sensitive and accommodating to what your emotions are, is the way that you're going to be able to foster more sustainable change towards the things that you're actually looking for. Okay. And so we have this emotional component. And one more thing that before I leave this emotional bucket is when there's a need that's driving us to do something, I always like to ask myself, like I literally put my hand on my heart and I say, what am I feeling? Okay. And what do I need? Okay. Like I like to think of my emotions when they pop up, even if they're like a happy emotion. How can I even amplify that? How can I address that need in a better, more efficient way? And so I like to talk to her. I like to ask her, what does she need? You know, sometimes when it's a destabilizing emotion like anger, frustration, powerlessness, sadness, grief, anything in that bucket, it could be so earth-shattering that you want to be able to sit there and say, okay, like pretend like it's a best friend that showed up at your front door and you're like, oh, you're here. You don't want to turn her away. She's a friend. You love her. You care about her. But you still have your whole work day. Maybe you have a family. Maybe you've got kids. You still got a bunch of stuff you have to do that day. So you welcome her into your house. You sit her on the couch. You get her a couple of things. Ask her how she's doing, what she needs, just like with the emotion, right? And then after she feels a little bit more compartmentalized, you're like, okay, I know that things are still not going really well. I know you're safe here. I still have to go ahead and do the things that I need to do. Can you sit in the back seat or can you stay on the couch while I still go live my life? And that way you're able to move forward and be able to move through the emotion, address what that emotion needs, and then go ahead and make the decisions and the behaviors that you want to do. I am very, very clear about making intentional and consensual decisions. So much of what we're eating and so much of our food is emotionally driven decisions, and we don't even realize that they are an emotionally driven decision. We're just like, I feel like this. I'm in the mood for this. I really want this. And that's fine, but what is actually underneath all of that is, ooh, I just really need some comfort right now. And when you're trying to solve for comfort, you can say food is an option, but now you have a couple of other options for other behaviors under this onion that you can then go to. Okay. Whereas, like, especially with the food, we just want that relief so bad and we trust so much in the food because again that is how we've communicated to the body. Every time I feel this way, I'm going to reach for this food. And therefore, you're reinforcing this behavior that, like, food is how we resolve our emotions. And if you're taking these detours and asking yourself, whoa, what do I feel? What do I need? Okay, how can I move through the rest of my day and keep this emotion in the back seat? That's not to say you're ignoring her. Like you still brought her in the house and you still said, what do I need? How can I help you? Like for me personally, when I struggle with frustration or anger or powerlessness, which are kind of my top three that cycle for me, I have to then say, okay, I really wish I didn't have to take the next 10, 15, 20 minutes to deal with this, but I do because it's kind of front and center. And maybe if I can deal with it later, like I have a client or whatever, then obviously I will. But if you can, taking that moment to just say, what do I feel and what do I need? And it's going to feel weird at first if you don't do it. It's going to feel theatrical. It's all those things. But the goal is to be consistent and then it'll be effective. Okay. Like that is usually what happens. Most people quit before they even get to that effective level. Like there are a lot of people who will say, I hate yoga, I hate meditation, I hate all these things. Well, that's probably because you quit before it became effective. And so I want you to really think about this going back to that triangle with your thoughts, your feelings, and your behaviors. Your feelings, your emotions, they are there, and we cannot deny that they exist within our body, even if we're not very connected to them. I met with a woman yesterday who is so disconnected from her emotions. She's a wonderful human, but very disconnected from her emotions. She lives very up here, and she is able to rely so much so on willpower and resiliency that she is like denying whatever her body needs, but the thing that she can't deny is that she's exhausted. And so, yes, the scale is going down. She's getting her exercise in, she's doing all the things, but then she recently had an injury, wasn't allowed to work out. And it literally drove her crazy because she didn't know how to say, oh, I feel uncomfortable. What can I do to relieve this feeling of discomfort? And it's not that she was even reaching for food, but she has to micromanage so much in her head because when we have nervousness, when we have worry, when we have fear, when we have anxiety, the only way to calm that is through trust. It's not through deep breathing. It's not through being calm. It's not through coping skills. It's through being able to trust. And when it comes to our relationship with food, we trust so damn much in food because we've reinforced that behavior by literally giving it to us in those moments of sadness, in those moments of stress, in those moments of whatever. And so I'm really spending a lot of time on the emotion and on the habit piece because I don't want you to like walk away from this and say, oh my gosh, I have all these bad habits and how do I stop them? Blah, 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 blah. It's not about how you stop them. It's about recognizing why they keep coming up, why these patterns are happening, and approaching it with more of a curiosity and an awareness versus a shame, a guilt, a frustration, bullying yourself in your head. Just being able to say like, whoa, this thing keeps happening for me. Like I keep overeating every night I go out on, every time I go out to dinner, or I keep overeating on Saturdays. Like there's no shame in getting mad at yourself or frustrated, but we want to be able to say, why is that happening? Do I trust that the food is going to enhance my fun? A lot of times we do. But what else can enhance your fun that isn't food related? So I don't want you to focus on breaking up with your bad habits, but I want you to develop an awareness as to why they're here and find ways to address them that are not food related. But if you do need the food, use it. Like it is clearly serving a need because when we restrict, 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 in my little pendulum, here's restrict, there's nowhere else to go except boom, all the way over here into overindulgence because we want that relief. And that's fair. That's totally fair. But I'm challenging you to say that there are many other ways that you can seek out that relief. So we have that emotional piece, that emotional bucket, all the bad habits, all that good stuff. And now I want to get into the behavior stuff. So when we're thinking about adding in new healthy habits, because that's now that second step of we've developed awareness of what our bad habits, our sabotaging habits are, we don't need to think of necessarily the direct opposite of the bad habits, like, oh, I'm snacking too much, so I better start eating more vegetables. It's not necessarily that. I want you to go back to the emotional thing that's keeping that bad habit stuck in place. And so for you, if it's frustration, if it's comfort, if it's wanting relaxation, if it's wanting fun, whatever it is, then you want to think about behaviorally, where can I add this into my life? And before I get into the formula of behavior stuff, I want to take it a step farther. If you can take a behavior that you're doing and you can attach it to multiple values in your life or multiple goals, it is going to be so much stronger. I actually just wrote about this the other day. I'm going to use myself as an example. I used to historically be not great at taking my vitamins. This was a habit I always wanted to form. It was going to help supplement me, all of these things, right? And so I really struggled to take my habit. I did all my formulas, I did all my consistency and everything. And very recently, in the last 2 months, I have been on fire consistent with taking my vitamins. I might have missed a couple of times, but great results. And why this is happening isn't because I got better at the formula, because I got better at the trust. So I started taking another supplement because I have knee pain and I get inflammation in my knees. And so I know that this supplement, I've worked with my chiropractor and my doctor, is going to help me with the inflammation and the reduction of pain in my knee, which I'm very incentivized to do right now. And it's not just because my motivation is really high, it's because I'm literally in pain. I'm trying to get rid of this negative emotion, this negative experience that I'm having through this. And so I feel so trusting in my vitamins to help me provide the outcome that I want, that it's much easier for me to keep it front of mind and to participate in that because it's attached to multiple outcomes. So it's attached to, obviously, I want to be able to maintain my weight loss and maintain my health, but it's also attached to a goal of I want to do 5 races this year. So my knees have to be in good shape in order to do that. And I'm not going to be able to achieve that goal if my knees are not in good shape. And then also, third, working out and doing heavy lifting, going for hikes, being out in nature, going outside is so nourishing to me. It brings me so much joy and happiness, and it honestly feels like fuels my soul. That is another reason why, like another goal, I should say, that's being supported by taking my vitamins. So here I have this one habit, taking my vitamins, and it is attached to the 3 different outcomes that I have in my life and my values. Like that third one, working out, being outside in nature, being in my community of people that love being athletic, like those are things that are super important to like me, Michelle, as a human. And so when I can take a behavior that I'm trying to solve, a behavior I'm trying to implement into my life, and I can attach it to multiple values, multiple goals that I have in my life, that is going to help with the consistency piece. And so, as we're in this behavior bucket, this is like your first and most important lesson. Consistency is always the goal. Then we're going to scale. Too many times I see people starting a habit where they're like, I'm going to do my exercise bike for 3 days a week at 60 minutes. And then maybe they're great for like the first couple of weeks, maybe even a month. Maybe if they have accountability, they're able to keep it longer and longer. You add a couple of tools, keep sustaining it, but eventually it falls off. And it falls off because it's either not attached to enough goals or it's also too hard. Maybe 60 minutes 3 times a week is actually way more difficult than you think that it is. So we want to scale that down so that you can be consistent. And when I say scale it down, I don't mean just like 30 minutes 3 days a week. I mean literally as small as put your bike shoes on at noon twice a week or 3 times a week or whatever feels small enough and scalable enough so that you can be consistent. I don't want you to worry about effectiveness. Like just like I was talking about my vitamins, like my vitamins are effective at helping me achieve those goals. But what I needed to do was be consistent before I could be effective. Like if I wasn't taking, I have 6 vitamins that I take. If I wasn't taking my other 4 vitamins, I'm sure as hell not going to be able to take the other 2 vitamins. So the goal is to always get yourself to be in a place where you can be consistent. And then just like I said before, I want your behaviors to be intentional and consensual. So you get to scale up that behavior consensually as you feel ready to do so. So going to that 60-minute exercise bike habit, that might look like after lunch, I'm going to put my bike shoes on. And there's going to be some days where you're going to have it in you. You're going to get on the bike. You're going to go for a great ride. It's going to feel great. You might do 30 minutes. You might do 60 minutes, whatever you're feeling like. But then there's going to be other days where you're like, I don't have it in me. I'm going to put the shoes on. I'm going to get on the bike and then I'm going to call it a day and you're not actually even going to go for a ride. But it's still a success because you still participated in the habit in its super small scalable level. Okay. So if you can say, all right, 3 weeks now, I've consistently been able to put my bike shoes on for 5 days at 12 o'clock. Some of those days you went for a ride, some of those days you didn't go for a ride. Then you get to problem solve and say, what feels good for me next? And if you're being connected to your emotions, you're connected to your body, you have assistant number one and assistant number two to give you plenty of information about what feels good about adding into your bike routine. So maybe that feels like less rides per week and they're longer rides. Or for you, maybe that feels like 10 minutes, 5 days a week. And you get to play around with that structure and that schedule in a way that makes sense for your specific life. Like if you're a parent of young children and you are historically home throughout the day, maybe 10 minutes a day for 5 days feels more relatable and more like easy for you versus somebody who's like, no, actually, I would rather just do Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I have 35 minutes that I can chunk in a workout, and that feels better to you. So every single part of your habit is consensual, is intentional, and you're having these conversations with yourself to say, what is working? What problem is this habit that I am that I'm participating in solving for? And you get to be curious and inquisitive in the most exciting ways versus getting stuck in the shame, the guilt, the I can't be consistent. I can't tell you how many women I have spoken to who are like, I just can't be consistent no matter what. And 9 times out of 10, I'm always saying it's probably too hard. And yeah, I get it. Is putting on your bike shoes going to give you the results that you're looking for? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I'm not going to deny that. But what it is going to do is it's going to help you be consistent and then you get to scale up. And when you scale up, there's going to be problems in a good way. Like problems are amazing. Failure is amazing. It is an asset in this journey because it's going to tell you why specifically things weren't working. When I was talking to you about my vitamin habit, I did every trick in the book where I was habit stacking, which I'll talk about in a bit. I was doing all sorts of like trying different, okay, it didn't work at night, maybe during the day, maybe if I pair it with my lunch. Like I was trying all these different problem solving things. And I got an opportunity to problem solve a lot because I wasn't getting frustrated and then stuck in that emotion and then the shame and the guilt. And then I don't do it for 4 weeks. And then when I feel brave enough, I come back, just like weight loss. We're doing weight loss. We start losing weight. It's great. The weight plummets. We hit our goal. 6 months later, the scale's creeping back up. We're feeling defeated. Maybe the scale has to come up 10 pounds, 20 pounds, 30 pounds before we're like, enough's enough. Now I want to try again. I'm trying to save you all of that trouble and just like see that failure as a curious reason, like, why didn't that work for me? And for me personally, I found a lot of different barriers. Like I didn't like taking it after lunch because my stomach already felt full. And then like adding in more water, the amount of water that it would take me to take 6 pills was too much. I was physically uncomfortable. I wasn't enjoying going back to work. So then I was putting it in different spots and I got the opportunity to problem solve this in a way that made me move through this so much faster because I wasn't getting frustrated with myself. I was addressing my emotions as they were coming up, and I was getting really clear about the problem and the outcome that I was looking to solve for with that habit. So, in the behavioral bucket, I want you to be thinking about what problem is this habit going to solve? Okay, what is my real goal here? Do I want to be more consistent with my exercise? So, therefore, I'm coming up with an exercise bike routine. Do I want, and if I want to be more consistent with my exercise and the exercise bike just like doesn't work time and time again, then maybe you look at a different type of exercise. You say, maybe I want to be going for afternoon walks. I just spoke with a woman yesterday who was like, I love nature. And I was like, great, let's attach nature and your love of nature with this goal of wanting to be more physically active and turn it into walks that like maybe you're feeling so great you go up to the tree and you give her a high five and you do 10 jumping jacks. Like I don't know, it can be that crazy and that bizarre because you get to just kind of lean into what feels good and what doesn't feel good for you. Like if that also looks like a 15-minute dance party with music in the morning with your young toddlers and you guys are dancing around and maybe you got like little dumbbells with you, like whatever that looks like, because now you get to be spending time with your children and working on your health and wellness, like you get to pair as many goals and outcomes as you can and really be curious and intentional about the problems that you're here to solve. And so I don't want to leave you without giving you like a little bit more science of the behavior part. And there's this formula. It's called B equals MAP, MAP. So when you're thinking of a new habit that you want to bring into your life, obviously I talked about making sure it's easy, making sure it's fun, so that, and then making sure that it is able to be consistent before you scale it up in terms of effectiveness. I want you to think about, so B equals MAP is behavior equals motivation plus ability plus a prompt. Okay. And so when I talked to you about habit stacking and some of the other things that I did to try to be more consistent with my habit, that's where this formula comes into play. So you have motivation. I want you to pretend that we have a graph right here. All right. And on your vertical axis, you have motivation. And on your horizontal axis, you have ability. Okay. And so the harder something is to do, it doesn't matter how high your motivation is. If you can't physically do it, the behavior is not going to happen, right? Like I could be so motivated to deadlift 400 pounds, but I don't have the physical ability to deadlift 400 pounds. So it's not going to happen. Okay, so we want to be able to play around with the ability, okay, just like too with the exercise bike. Even though you might be physically able to do a 60-minute bike, if you're not like comfortably able to do a 60-minute bike on a whim, then I don't think you should be starting with a 60-minute bike. You want to be able to bring that intensity down as low as you can to make the ability as close to that point, this 90-degree angle point on the axis. Okay, because the behaviors that are going to happen are going to be happening closest to that 90-degree mark. Okay, and then up here in motivation, the higher your motivation is, obviously, the more likely that you are going to be able to do it. And the lower your motivation is, you need it to be super duper 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 easy so that you are super close to that um that 90-degree angle, okay? And so I want you to just be thinking about motivation is going to fluctuate. And you can get more motivated some days by attaching it to values, making it fun, like bringing other people in. Like you could play around with your motivation, but I don't think it's like necessarily so huge. You have to always play around with it and always try to adapt with it. Like it's okay that you're going to have motivation to not work out, but you're still going to show up and you're still going to put your sneakers on and you're still going to celebrate it because that's going to reinforce it. That's how you can communicate back to the body. Just like in that emotional bucket I was talking about, when you bring an emotion in, when you feed yourself, when you show up in an environment, that is how you are telling your brain and your body, this is where I want to go because you're up here in control center and they're always listening to you unless you give them a microphone. And then they're talking much louder than you, right? Where some people who are overthinkers, it's like you gave your brain a microphone and she doesn't need a microphone. You're up here. You're the president. This is your cabinet. You get to make these decisions. Even though sometimes we don't feel like we get to, is because we're making emotional decisions. We're stuck in our head. We're here. I want you to make your decisions be more strategic versus emotional. Okay. I lost myself a little bit in the graph. We have motivation, we have ability, and then that P. The P is the prompt. So this is where we talk about habit stacking. So habits, like a prompt is just like a reminder to do this activity. So that could be anything from after lunch, I do this habit. Before I put the dishes away, I do this habit. I want you to be very, very specific about when you're going to do this habit. And it's not going to be based in time. Maybe some of us are really good with like at 12 o'clock I do this, at 1 o'clock I do that, at 2 o'clock I do this. But most of us kind of move through our day a little bit more fluidly than that. And if you were to set an alarm on your phone, and it said at 2:05 you're going to do this habit, how easy is it for you to just swipe that alarm away and say, oh, I'm in the middle of something, I can't do it. It feels disruptive, and it's very easy for us to swipe those push notifications away. So when we think about a prompt, I want you to think about where can you attach it to something that you're already doing regularly in your day. Like for example, for me, I have a walking habit. I walk every day after lunch. I might have lunch at 1 o'clock on Mondays, but I might have lunch at 3:30 on Wednesday. Doesn't matter. Whenever I get done with lunch, and for some people, they need to get even more specific. They'll say, like, when I put my plate in the sink or when I zip up my lunch pail, the next thing that I do is put my sneakers on and go for a walk. You want to stack that habit into something else you're already doing so you don't have to worry about remembering it. And you don't have to worry so much about the motivation and obviously the ability you get to play around with it. If you can really get savvy with being curious as to these three different pieces that make up your behavior, your motivation, your ability, and your prompt, you can figure out why things are failing and why they're not working for you or why they are working for you. Like with my vitamin habit, it is working for me because it's habit stacked to something that I'm already doing. I do it before dinner now. That's been really successful for me. It's the motivation is there because it's attached to three different goals that I'm interested in. And I'm physically able to do it. I'm physically able to swallow 6 pills. It is not that hard on the ability scale. I wouldn't say that it's a 0 if it's a 1 out of 10. I would say it's more of a 4, but it's nothing like deadlift 400 pounds. Okay. You get to look at your habits and say, why are they breaking down for me? Why am I not getting consistent? Okay. It's because what's wrong with the motivation? What's going on with the ability? What's going around with the prompt? Can we play around with these variables so that we feel more comfortable participating in our habits? Because unexpected change feels really dysregulating. And when we can't address that emotion because we're busy, we're in the middle of something, or honestly, we don't even know it's happening, we can play around with these other factors. So I think I've spent so much time. I could talk all day about this, but I hope that this felt like a comprehensive understanding. I really want to go back to that behavior triangle really quick. Behaviors, thoughts, and feelings. Okay. The thing I didn't talk about today was the thoughts because yes, we have the ability to change our thoughts. And as a cognitive behavioral therapist, it's something that I spent a lot of time helping my clients do and teaching them through changing their thoughts so that it can change their mood, so that they can have the congruence between their thoughts, their feelings, and their behaviors. But your thoughts are going to change. Like as you're communicating with yourself differently, as you're acting differently, as you're feeling differently, your internal dialogue is going to naturally adapt and change. And just as a little tidbit, we can use reframing as a way to say, like as a way to create a different emotional reaction to something. So if we say, I'm a failure, and you attach a negative emotion to I'm a failure, well, then now you're just flooded with that emotion. Your behaviors are going to be stuck. They're going to be slow. They're not going to be congruent with somebody who has a higher energy and is excited and is motivated. But when you say, wow, failure is an asset, boom, now that feels lighter. It feels differently, but it's not going to feel differently without doing the behavioral and without doing the emotional, the somatic bodily piece attached to it. Okay. So, not that I don't love reframing and thought changing and all sorts of different little like hacks to do with the brain. I think that they are just an additive that we can put on. They're like the cherry on top of the ice cream, but we need to make the ice cream. We need to make the sundae first. So we have to we have to be really focused on how our emotions are affecting us so that we're not making emotional decisions and we're making strategic decisions. And what are our behaviors? What are we actually doing every day versus like what we want to be doing every day? I want you to think of this as building a lifestyle, not just changing a couple of pieces on the board. Like you're redecorating your entire lifestyle so that you can start acting differently, you can feel differently, because consistency is always the goal. And once you know how to be consistent, you can scale that up at every single level. Like in my weight loss journey, I lost 30 pounds, but I lost 20 pounds at first. And it was 2 years before I lost the second 10 or the last 10 pounds. And that's not because it took me that long. It's because I didn't want to consensually scale up to do the things that I needed to do in order to lose that 10 pounds. And that was because, again, I'm going through all the behavior stuff, I'm going through all the emotional stuff, and all the goals that I had in my life. I was like, newly married at the time. I was traveling a lot. I was really focused on building my group practice. I didn't really have capacity to go like try to lose 10 pounds. Even though I may have would have really wanted to, I didn't want to enough to do the things that I need to do. And that's okay. Like you don't have to want to lose all the weight that you need to lose. You don't have to get attached to a number. But it was like years later in my life when I had capacity to do this and have these conversations with myself and do that nervous system regulation, then I was able to lose those 10 pounds. So much of weight loss feels like that would be nice type of a goal versus a no, I actually want to strategically like make sure I'm doing this right versus like what are these small little hacks and small little tweaks that I can do in my life. I want you to think of this as like much more much larger than that, but it doesn't have to be time consuming. It just has to be time consuming in the front end because you're learning. It's like driving a car for the first time. Everything feels so overwhelming. And now you can probably get in the car and like have the radio blasting and have the GPS on and be talking to somebody on the phone, Bluetooth, of course, and like be able to do all of that while you're driving. So, I hope you found this super, super informative. If you have any questions, I know your pop's still on here, Claire, so I'm gonna stop the recording in a second. But if you have any questions about anything, I'm here for you. I would love to support you in your journey. Reach out to me, and I hope you have a beautiful rest of your weekend. Thank you.